So thanks for coming along tonight. Yeah, Adam, thanks for having me and everyone else. Tonight's talk will see me going through a retrospective of insights from developing brief battles on consoles and PC. It's a pretty broad retrospective from like a mashup of notes and experiences we've had along the way we found most interesting. So there's probably going to be like things here and there from a little bit of a dev perspective, bit of admin. Most of it's probably like, it might sound like on a negative scale of things, but like we want to do the things like, if you're doing this, keep these things in mind. It's kind of like what would we want to know if we did this all again, which we are. So rather than that, yeah, what went well, what didn't go well, there will be a lot more, yeah, really touching on interesting points that'll be what to expect. I'm covering, what else we got here? Sorry, oh my god, notes. Being a retrospective on our own game, this might be a little bit self-absorbed and not all necessarily transferable, but hopefully you'll find something useful to you. And I have a disclaimer here that I'm pretty new to public speaking, and my partner says I speak too fast and talk too much crap, so call me out on that if I do. Speaking too quiet too. Apparently that's got to get added to the list. With that covered, let's get started. Cool, so my name's Andrew Freeth. I'm one half of Juicy Cupcake. It's an indie dev team. We're a duo based in Adelaide that we started a handful of years ago. My role in the company is pretty mixed as an indie generalist. So mainly I'm doing business, game design, concept environment art, audio and music, anything on web, social, yeah, pretty general. Everything else is done by the other half of the team, Tim Tiley. He's just a super intelligent programmer who gets stuck with modeling and animating strange designs and concepts I come up with. So Juicy Cupcake always has been, and probably is for now still as well, a part-time business for us. So that's working on weekends, evenings, and for a weekday here and there for a while. It's kind of, I guess, we don't really see it as a crunch to us because it's kind of like an extra job on the side that we really want to make this happen and really mitigate risk in our own way. So that's kind of what we're going with that. So I'm also working another full-time job at the moment as lead QA and doing mixed digital agency roles at Atomics in North Adelaide. That's a really cool digital agency to work at. And as you can see, my passion outside of games is food. Eating it, cooking it, it's all good. Love it all. And you're probably going to see a bunch of dog pictures throughout the slides. Less relevant to games, but 3 little doggos in our life. So if you're not a dog person, that's a shame. You can probably get out. Cool. And I think that's Ruby on her 9th birthday this year. It's a nice little hat. Cool. And shout out to Alex from Allenhead as well, who had his own Dev Doggo Butters. Much recent talk. Cool. All right, so a little bit about Brief Battles, the game that this retrospective is all about. It's a cheeky, cute, family-friendly couch game where you fight your friends using superpowered underpants, or you can take on challenges, do solo and co-op, things like that with a friend. So the dev time for Brief Battles was about 3.5 years part-time. So when we released it, that is, and we're still doing a little bit more on now for Switch, and we're also looking at updates, things like that. So it's going to be continued, but we've kind of scaled that back a bit, and we've started to also look at what's next as well. So we initially released on Xbox One, PS4, and Steam simultaneously back in May this year, and we have a release for Switch that's almost done. We'll probably announce it anytime now, I guess. Wait and see. So Brief Battles was in production for a fair while, being part-time, so it was long enough that we were going to get around like a bunch of different things. So we always we started out during the Greenlight days as well. Like that was quite a while ago. I don't think Steam's had Greenlight for quite a while, so that was a really interesting experience for us. We've had a successful Kickstarter. We've been a recipient of an Unreal Dev Grant, which was amazing. I won't really dive into that much, so I might just touch on it now. Like we submitted for that about 5 times over the course of about 2.5 years since its conception, and we just changed our pitch and our purpose each time with that, and we spoke to people from Unreal. So if you've got a rep in that engine, maybe ask them like what's Unreal like wanting to know at that time, what could help you with your pitch for a dev grant like that. And we didn't hear back at all through any of those 5, and then it was about I think like 4 or 5 months, maybe 6 months after our last submission that we got an email from them saying, hey, here's some money. So yeah, don't give up on that. Like don't just give things a go. Put your name out there. You never know what could happen. Yeah, other few things we got in there were we went to GDC last year with RD and Xbox. That was pretty amazing to be selected for that. We've had some super neat crossovers from like Ukulele, World of Goo, Machinarium, Total Temple Deluxe, a few other ones. that was another one, which just ask people if you've got like a game that's looking pretty good and you're interested in crossovers. It doesn't hurt to ask. I think probably like 60% of the people that we asked said yes, which is pretty cool, and yeah, pretty amazing to have them in our game now when it's such a small game in comparison to theirs. We've had some really heartwarming reviews. That's been an amazing thing since launch. Making this game was like a local, like family-friendly game. What we always really wanted was families to have fun. So I remember like in our first day of release, we had like a review from the other side of the world where Mum just said like this was like the most amazing game. Her kids hadn't had like that much fun with her in ages. So she went to the effort to send a personal email to us. And obviously, yeah, just crazy. Almost makes me want to cry now. We made some great friends along the way, and yeah, we shipped our first game. It was really sweet. And that's a little bit of the game. If you haven't seen it before, a little bit of gifage there with Goo Kevin and Ukulele Violet. So next I'll talk a bit about our decision to self-publish. Something we were kind of undecided about along the way. We really kind of jumped back and forward talking to publishers here and there, looking for different funding alternative ways, seeing what would be possible for us. So originally we did just want to start with self-publishing, but we had one, like I think probably about a year and a half in, we decided we need some money to make this happen and make it happen right. So yeah, we wanted to do what was best for our game and our company as well. So I think we would have invested like a few weeks and a few months here and there investigating publishers, funding opportunities, marketing team to defense. Oh, sorry, that's Frankie, another dog there that you haven't seen before yet. Sorry, losing track there. So we tried applying just about every relevant game grant that we could find. We didn't hear back from any of them at all, I don't think, except for like there was some kind like little bits of information back where they gave us a little bit of feedback and things like that. But it really helped refine our pitch and how we approached each one along the way, which was really good. So grants weren't looking great, so we looked into some indie publisher outreach. I won't go heaps deeply into it as it deserves a whole different talk in itself. And we're probably not the best people to talk about it because we didn't continue the process after the discussion phase. But from there, like the planning, communication of the whole thing was really time consuming with a fair bit of back and forth. So like that for us being part-time indies, that really did take like 2 or 3 months of just like chatting to different publishers and sort of like developing like new concept docs and like meeting them for calls and Skype in different time zones, things like that. So yeah, if you're going to do publisher outreach, set a fair bit of time aside if it's something you're looking at. And even if you're not looking for a publisher, something we found was it was really interesting to speak to big publishers that were interested in your game. And they would kind of go through and say like, here's what makes your game marketable in their perspective, what they would like to do with it, things like that. So that really helped us refine our like pitch, and like it also helped us know that our product was worthwhile and some things that we could do and maybe develop on even if we didn't go ahead. And a lot of the big indie publishers were like really genuine as well, and they're really happy to just give advice and help out, which was super cool. So we found that all but one publisher for us were keen to change the game scope to be online, to make sure there was online multiplayer. There's a few other aspects they wanted to bring in there as well. And I think that was really what was happening with the trend of games at the time. And that's something that we weren't really keen to do, because almost every publisher as well didn't necessarily want to pay for that to happen. They're like, well, we can wait, you can make the game for another year and a half, and then we'll have online play in there. So that wasn't really that valuable to us. We did have a sure thing or two as well, that they didn't want online play, but then the value of what they were offering also wasn't really enough to suit. Like we had already done so much with the game. We thought like, sure, you might take it to some events, but like the terms and the time you want to log us into a certain thing, you're like, isn't really going to bode well for us, and we're not going to make any money in the long run probably. So through all of that, we ended up deciding to stick with self-publishing, and it kind of gave us the confidence getting the feedback from those publishers that was like a worthy product that would tackle a Kickstarter campaign. So that's something we did there, and we ended up so keeping our day jobs. That was one of the things that had to happen, keep working part-time, running the Kickstarter campaign, applying for a commercial overdraft. I can't give financial advice, so decide if that's your own best choice for that, but that was like really useful for us. I think rather than a regular loan, it's really low interest rate that it was able to, like, if I needed to go to an event or there was a big expense coming up, I could handle it for the time being and deal with it later. We teamed up with a marketing firm, so that's Stride PR in the US. That was really useful as well. They were really helpful anytime we needed anything, just to give some advice and bounce ideas off them, and they were really useful around announcements. and we plan to utilise the international exports grant in advance. So money that we spent going overseas or doing some promotion, things like that, or money with our marketing team, we could then claim, I think, can't say exactly how much, I can't remember, a bit back on that, which we're actually doing now that we're finally released the game, invested enough money. I think you have to spend about $15,000 within a 2-year period to be able to claim anything back, and it might be you can get back around $7,500 of that. But apparently it's meant to be fairly slow, so with returns for government. So yeah, that's our sort of self-publishing where we went. I'd like to go next through some stats and tracking time. So if I get a show of hands, how many people here track time for the work that they do? That's like pretty good, yeah. About half, that's really good. I would say like we started tracking time around 9 months of development. It was after hearing a GCAP talk that referenced the importance of it. I can't remember who it was, so unfortunately can't reference that. But they're absolutely correct. It's incredibly valuable. And if you're not doing it now, you really should be. If you're running your own business or if you're just doing things freelance, like you want to know, like, are you quoting correctly? Are you spending like an additional like 12 hours on this thing in your own time that you shouldn't be? You really want to be making sure that you're getting the right work amount done. And it's really great looking back as well. So like, I think doing trailers internally was something that we did, and we think like making a trailer that might not take so long, maybe it'll get faster each time we do it. We've done it before, but about every trailer we made internally was about 50 hours total spent on each one, which for us that was like an interesting one to see. Like even if we'd done it before, we've had that experience. There's all this time like communicating involved with it, sending it to people, getting an A/B test, sending it back. You send it to some platforms, they say the branding, even though it meets their guidelines, doesn't meet their guidelines, they'll send it back again, you do some more edits, and it's really useful to know if we're going to squeeze this trailer in. We've got like another launch announcement coming up. Like there's 50 hours of work here, we only have like 30 hours of time available. We have to push things back. So yeah, really good to have that data. So some of the data we got up there from missing the first initial 9 months is we worked a total of 6,801 hours. That's 850 full-time days in that time period. So that's a fair bit of time, considering it's a part-time evening thing, but it worked out pretty well for us. So if you look there, we've got 1,868 of that as development, creative 1,626 hours, admin and PM, and finance and events are kind of combined there. Pardon me. So there's actually an interesting stat there that really dev, creative, and admin are all kind of like even in the time spent. And for us, I think that's a little bit different because Kickstarter planning and campaign, which was huge, that was like, I guess like 2 months of our whole time. And some of those publisher outreach as well, that added like a pretty significant chunk of time to our efforts. And I would say that in that admin and PM one as well, like there's probably a couple of 100 hours there of just emails alone. I feel like as soon as you start doing things, you get an insane amount of emails that end up taking, I don't know, every night of the week I'll still be answering like 30 minutes of emails, which is, I don't know, it just adds a lot. An interesting one there as well that we found is for dev, the amount of time of dev, in pretty much any task, about 15% should be added on top of that for QA time. If you want to get things done right, make sure you're kind of scoping QA, don't leave it too late either. It's a really useful thing to have. Just when I drink water, let it sink in, super important and super easy to track time. So those of you who aren't doing it, totally do it. Something like Toggle, completely free. You can just make some little projects or something in there and start tracking and getting really useful information. Okay, so next up, Kickstarter. Again, there's so much to do with Kickstarter that it could probably be its own talk. I really can't cover it all in this one, but these are a number of standout points that Tim and I noted. So there's a number of strategies you can really take when running a Kickstarter. You could be either going for the full development fund, or you could be trying to just impress a publisher or something like that, or make a substantial amount of dev time funding for yourself. Researching our game and realistically what we could get, our strategy was to go with having a near complete product, so people felt like it was pretty trustworthy, and asked for a safer, smaller funding amount, not to fund the entire project, but just to assist with upcoming costs that we couldn't manage ourselves. So there's some things like localization we wanted to tackle, some extra ratings that we couldn't handle. We really wanted just a little bit of money to help that out, but if the Kickstarter exploded as well, that would be great, but the goal that we had was enough to suit our needs. And the other one was to gauge interest as well from the public, because like, sure, we found that like publishers were interested in the game, or some were that were like happy with the scope that it was at, But yeah, with the community, actually interested in that as well. And Kickstarter is like a really great way to build up a community. So we found that was pretty much like one of the main goals that we see, that people are trying to do Kickstarters on the indies now, or even as like a big company, AAA or a AA indie. They're sometimes doing Kickstarter campaigns where they're making like $90,000 or something. But that's really obviously not enough to pay anybody or do anything in their team, but it's just to like build a bit of interest, build a core community around your game as well, and that can be really valuable too. So we found that really great. Kickstarter community building, time spent back at. So this is an interesting point there. So the funding itself for us, we found leading up to Kickstarter, we probably did about a month or more full-time work preparing for it, which was, I guess, valuable, like really refining the pitch for our game. And then during that month as well, it was pretty much day-to-day promotion as well. So after the first day of the campaign, it just drops off. You're not on the front page of Kickstarter anymore. You have to do all manual outreach until about the last week of the Kickstarter, which is pretty insane. So you got to set a lot of time aside. And then once the Kickstarter ends, if you're successful, we probably spent about 1.5 hours per person, per backer, doing responses to certain things, managing things post-campaign. And when you think about the average like work wage, I guess, per hour, or how much this game was backed for, like we're only selling a game for some people for like $15 if they got in early, or 20 if they wanted a few other things. We spent more time per person than we did actually getting money for the game. So in the end, like the Kickstarter generally comes out as a loss financially, because that coupled with some physical items, things like that. So like it was really good at the time. It added money that we needed at the time. But long term, if we were, I guess we're not currently paying ourselves a wage for that time either, because we were early on, we were just working for it. It would actually be, if you were in a company position and you were doing that, you'd be kind of maybe looking, this Kickstarter might not make us money, but it could build us community. So you got to kind of keep that in mind. Sorry, skipping too fast. So I think I already touched up a little bit on that. Organic visits dropping off after a while. Another really interesting point, we're doing a Kickstarter that we didn't think about at all until right at the end, is that reviews and key redemption for Kickstarter backers don't count as actual reviews or day one sales. So that was a real painful hit for us for Steam and consoles for initial KPIs. So day one of your launch, you want to have like hundreds of people ready to go to buy your game, so that if they see it on the storefront, they click it there, they buy it. Steam, Xbox, Sony, they're like, hey, people will see this game and they like it. There's a whole lot of research to go into that, but pretty much doing Kickstarter, you just kill that off completely. So any Steam reviews we have at the moment, most of those people were Kickstarter backers who redeemed keys. So those reviews, they exist if you scroll down the page, but they don't actually add anything to our review count total, and it doesn't count towards the score, no matter positive or negative. And yeah, the same goes for consoles as well. They don't really take into account as a successful thing. So pretty much Kickstarter was great, but we killed off all of our like day one sales from people that were like followed up. So there was more people buying, which was great. But that's a huge hit really, because you really want to be making that relationship with Valve early on to make sure that they keep putting you on their storefront, so you make stats for them. Next up, providing console keys. That was an interesting one as well that we lost out on a little bit in the end. So I see a lot of Kickstarters don't tend to offer console keys for anything but Xbox, and I do see now why that is the case. So we spoke to each platform before we went ahead for Kickstarter to make sure that it was okay to give out keys, and we even added platforms like PS4 and Switch we didn't actually have available at the start of our campaign. We decided we'll check with them, but it's cool to do keys and then add it as an offering to the campaign for a later decision. Everything was fine. We checked the documentation. It wasn't really going to cost us anything, or only cost a little bit, wasn't too bad. But then when it came to actually requesting the keys, when we were getting close to launch, there were some extra fees that were mentioned when we actually went to do the process, and it was well beyond what would even be valuable for us to do. So say we wanted 100 keys for one platform, there might be a fee that was worth 1,000 keys or something for us. So it was really not a worthwhile process. So that's something to really keep in mind if you're doing console platforms. There's got to be a certain threshold. I would definitely go and ask for a quote from different platforms before you go ahead. to make sure you know exactly what you're in for. If you're trying to get console keys, our solution was actually going to buy gift cards for that particular platform that were valued higher than our game ever so slightly, and giving it to people, which they loved, I think. So they could go and get whatever game they wanted in the end, and it probably also gave us a few actual like day one sales back, I guess. But but it was a loss at the time, but an interesting learning experience as well. And yes, getting unbiased feedback from people who aren't your friends for Kickstarters, that's a pretty huge one to do as well. We were doing a little game before Brief Battles called Melon Quest, which we had a Kickstarter for, or we're going to do a Kickstarter for, and we really spread the word and try to ask a lot of people in the industry and people who had successful Kickstarters before what was going to work and what wasn't. Met a pretty nice guy, Trent, from from the team that make Armello. He gave us some really soul-crushing, heartbreaking feedback at the time, but it was so absolutely useful to us to see our campaign wasn't up to scratch. If we did it, we would have failed. We might have just given up on what we're doing or moved on like that. So definitely get some third-party people that aren't your friends, that'll call out any shit so that you make a good campaign and you have a good chance of success. Cool beans. And Kickstarter adds a little bit of expectations to the last point there. So some things that we did in our Kickstarter as well that weren't overly smart, as we did beta as an option that you get being a backer. But then when so there were a few people that went for that and it was good, but the Kickstarter backers weren't all necessarily people that played the beta and gave feedback. So we did want to get more people into a beta, but then we're kind of in that position where we shouldn't really be giving out free beta keys or things like that to everyone else, because the perception of some people that got on Kickstarter, they wouldn't really be happy with that. So you kind of got to be careful. There's a few things as well we wanted to do, promotions leading up to launch that we couldn't really do without sort of disrespecting that the Kickstarter backers got that first. We didn't want to cause any trouble there. So that's an interesting one to consider as well. You are kind of locked into some decisions there. Cool. Skipping over Kickstarter because I don't have heaps of time for that one. Must-have is to sell your game. So next up, I'll start talking about things we needed to set up and sell our game on each platform. There's a heap of sort of specific insights for that. If there's too many points up there, you probably just take a picture, or I can just send you the slides after. Even happy to. So with every platform, Steam and consoles, you either got to want to have a proper company set up or be a sole trader. You're going to need all of that info. You're going to need a business bank account that matches your company exactly. If there's a discrepancy in there, I don't know why, especially with the US, they have a lot of trouble sending you money. We're still waiting right now for some payments, and we started selling our game in May because of slight, tiny discrepancies, and it's pretty insane to try and rectify as well. So yeah, get those above details right early. So we changed our company structure after signing up for Xbox and PS4 as developers, and we wanted to change our email and just a one word in our company name, nothing else. And that took probably about 2 to 3 months to resolve, I think. It was a pretty insane process. Things, once they are done with these platforms, they're pretty well locked in, and it's quite challenging to fix them. And even after we did those changes, we still found down the track small things where we're just trying to sign up or do the next phase in a step, or activate a dev kit that we hadn't yet. It was still assigned to the old company, and just you got to jump through hoops for ages. So get your info right early on. Make sure your company's set up, your bank account's set up. You're happy with it. Roll with that. So an accountant really wouldn't hurt as well for advice if you're going to go through this, especially if you run into a confusing billing or tax question, because things might be different for everybody. Generally, an accountant will be able to tell you what's right and wrong, so you're not getting ripped off with tax as well. Because most of the time, we shouldn't really get taxed too much here in Australia. And an audience is another really important thing to have, any of these platforms still, so make sure you're always working on that. And a personal contact is a nice thing to have with each platform. Not entirely necessary, but it can be really great to try and meet reps from Xbox, PS4, Nintendo, or Valve at different events, so you have a direct point of contact if you ever get stuck. I think you can totally get away without it, but if there's really long wait times, so we've had a few situations with some platforms where a ticket might be open, a sport request, for a couple of months, and we've been following up about it weekly, and it would just never sort of get done because there's a lot going on, or you're kind of low in the queue. But if you have a direct contact, you might be able to CC them in, and they're oh wait, this has been going for ages, they'll escalate it, get done straight away. So if you can meet someone and have a direct contact, really useful. And if you can't get in touch with a rep, I would say get in time with the team behind your game. So for us, we caught up with some Unreal reps. I think David Stelzer from UE4, we met him at GCAP, and he introduced us to people from Sony, some different publishers as well. So like, if you're, I'm sure Udemy does the same thing as well. Just try and meet reps that just want to help you, because they're going to make money out of you making money as well. So it can be really powerful to have. Cool. And yes, that one, really, really tricky. Get your business details right before signing up for anything. Really important. Cool. Making games for Steam. Bit of Steam specific stuff here. Steam's a great place to start. I think we almost could have just done our game straight up on Steam. It would have been a really good experience to kind of learn how all that went. But if you really want to go for that, it's a really good place to start. There's no real barrier for entry. It's essentially self-serve now. The platform onboarding is now automated, really. So there's like a focus on thorough documentation rather than the other platforms. You're going to have people manually putting you through each process, and that adds delays. If you do need support, there are contact details available, and the team's pretty responsive, but you probably have to click through like 5 or 6 pages to get a contact from someone from Valve. You can build your Steam game pretty easily with popular game engines, so you won't really need to put any effort to get the SDK in there. You can just like click and deploy most of the time. In comparison to console development, there's like console development has really intense certification for all these different requirements and user handling, things like that. Steam doesn't really have that. Like, there will still be humans checking what you're doing in the end, and they might be like, hey, your storefront says this, but your game doesn't quite meet the expectation. Like for us, we found that they just didn't find one of like the main things in our game. That was like they're like, oh, there's no co-op in there. They just didn't play with 2 players. So like, there'll still be people checking it, but there's no real like heavy things. You don't have to have achievements. You don't have to use any of their features. Steam's really relaxed in that part. For us, we did find that making a game with like gamepad focus, Steam did knock us back for mouse support for that one. So like, you could play the game with keyboard entirely, mouse was disabled, but we like then had to put up a little warning on our page saying keyboard and mouse not supported. And that was probably like a pretty big deterrent. If you're on Steam, there's like a big red notice when you first get on the page. Like, that's not really going to help you. So make sure your GUI is really like compatible for every platform if you're going to do that. Cool. And yeah, you're not really going to have to read a heap of cert guidelines for Steam compared to consoles. So it's really, really great place to start. Now for consoles, the following notes on the next slides I'll cover for Xbox, PS4 and Switch. A lot of the requirements overlap and are similar, so I won't go into too much detail per platform, especially due to NDAs as well. But you can kind of assume like all of these things are worth like keeping in mind, no matter what platform you're going with. So console porting has a fair bit of work involved, but it's easier than it might seem. I think like there's probably a perception that like console porting is really crazy, and if you talk to like getting an external team to port a game, I think quotes that we sold were things like $50,000 for a port, which we would never spend that money internally, especially when I show like hours that we spent on it. It's like nowhere near close to that. So let's talk getting approved first. So for like Xbox, you pretty much just visit the website, complete the form, they'll get back to you, they might ask you some details about your game, they approve you, they send you 2 dev kits, you're like, yeah, really cruising. Nintendo, visit developer.nintendo.com, sign up again, it's just a web form. You don't need to know anybody. I think after that point, you won't have access to Switch, I don't believe. You'll see like old platforms, and then you can just look for an email there, contact them directly, say I would like Switch access. They'll probably ask you for a pitch again for your game, and then you're in for that as well. PS4, they do now have, I think when we started out, you couldn't apply to develop with Sony if you're from Australia or any Pacific country. But now you can go to partners.playstation.net, complete a form again, they'll sign you in. I think it's only for the American branch for PS4 though, but there are 2 emails on that page with the forms. I'd maybe even just contact them directly first to say, hey, like, can we get set up for both regions? So there's the SIEE, which is Europe, Asia and Australia, and then SIEA, which is just Americas. But yeah, you want to be signed up for both, and you will need to always be publishing your game for both as you go through. Cool beans. So if you're signing up to these platforms, you want to access the tools. You're going to generally have to pitch a game to get approved, so you don't need a lot, as long as you have like a polished short demo available, a game design doc ready. It's not exactly like, not each platform will want a game design doc. They might want a variant of it, and they might have some specific information they want, but you're always going to be in a good place if you have one ready, and you probably should have one if you're making a game anyway. Yes, keeping in mind the PS4 regions there as well, that you need to do submissions for both. And there's also SAEJ as well, which I think will be more tricky again, because that's there's a few different laws with the releasing internationally for like Japan, and that brings in like other countries like China as well. And Nintendo also requires you to request regions in their setup, though the submission process is super linear. I think Nintendo being kind of fairly new to open up to developers and indies, their platform is just, I don't know, it's more modern. It's like they've considered everything you can go through. They're just like clicking through the one step sort of process, whereas everyone else has like a Frankenstein of things from like PS2 or Xbox One, like the first Xbox. So yeah, Nintendo's super cruisy to get there in comparison. And yeah, don't be disheartened if your title isn't approved, really, because positively ask for feedback of like why not, I suppose, I guess. It's always good to get feedback for next time. Cool. Next I'll go through some business requirements for each of the consoles as well. You may need a static IP for your office network, so business internet, it's probably the same price as regular internet, but if you have an ABN or your company number, pretty easy to set up. It's also pretty amazing too, so I've got it at home, but you get priority support. If like the internet goes down, they'll send someone out like straight away. It doesn't cost any more than anything else. You get priority bandwidth. It's useful to have, but it is annoying that for some consoles you will have to develop locally. You can never like take it with you to work somewhere else. Platforms have pretty strict security terms for the console hardware. If you're working in like a shared open office space like this, you wouldn't be able to like have a dev kit sitting on a desk here somewhere. But I guess when you're doing any sort of agreements early on, reading about that, just make sure, like, maybe double check if they're sure with it. I'm sure if you've got like a locked up office here, it shouldn't be too bad. A lot of platforms are kind of getting more loose, I suppose, in their sort of requirements for that, but it is their IP, and they don't really want people to ever steal it. Communications with each platform may have delays. That's one thing to really consider when you're developing. So any sort of request we have, most you probably get an answer in like a day or so, but sometimes things, as I said before, might take weeks or months to get resolved for certain requests. We had definitely like at least 2 cases that were like well over a couple of months, which was really painful and really blocking for us. So it was actually one of the reasons that we like only went with Xbox at the start, because it was just easier. They were like a lot quicker to ask things for us. It's more likely to happen around event dates as well. So your contacts and reps are always traveling, so they're going to things like E3 or Gamescom or PAX. So if you've got to keep that in mind as well. If you're planning to like go through CERT or get a lot of feedback or plan a launch around one of those times, the reps that you're working with each platform might not be available, and it might really slow things down. And it's really useful to have them around if you're there, because sometimes when they're passing information over, things get a bit messy as well. Got to get your reading glasses out for all the contracts you're going to have. They're pretty long, pretty intense. I think, especially ones from Sony, are pretty brutal to read, not super user-friendly. You can probably get some people to look at it for you if you need to, if you're not too comfortable legally, but contracts generally seem pretty boilerplate. But if something's not going to work out for you, you can definitely bring it up and talk it out. Just make sure you read them, because there's some really important stuff in there. And keep in mind, when you're publishing your game as well, in those contracts, you're agreeing to like a minimum terms of service with the title. So like on Steam, you could piss people off and you could like remove your game pretty much, and like that's fine. But on consoles as well, you really have to like keep updating your game. If they did make a change, you might have to patch it for them or something like that. It's really a long-term commitment in that, and not everyone sort of like things like payment services aren't automated for all of them as well. You might be chasing them up to like make sure you're paying them for life. So yeah, it's things to keep in mind that when you're signing up for console dev, it's a bit involved with it. Next up are some costs you probably need to take into account when you're moving on to console dev. A lot of these you can get away without having on Steam. So I often hear like rumours of onboarding fees for indie devs for consoles, but that's not really a thing that we've seen at all, and I don't think they would be introducing that any time when all platforms are trying to be more open. So eFIG's game and achievement trophy translations are like 100% required. So that's just like English, French, Italian, German, Spanish. You need to get these professionally done. Google Translate is really not a viable option. Like the phrasing is like completely different for everything. So that's not usually too expensive if you don't have a lot of text in your game. But if you have a text-heavy game, it's going to be pretty pricey. Look around and try and see reviews of what quality is best. But you're also going to kind of be mind that a lot of companies that are doing translation are like have really horrible working standards as well. So if you can afford it to go to somewhere that like it will, I don't know, they treat their workers better, it's probably not a bad idea. And eFIG's translations are also required for storefront content. So that means any descriptions, keywords, search terms, etc. It all needs translating. One thing that we would suggest is we only did translations for eFings at the start. And we didn't really know. For us, that meant without localized storefront content, Xbox and PS4 didn't list our game in a heap of regions, so they only did it for the 12 or so regions that were suitable with eFings storefront content. So we let launch with 30 or so regions in Europe and a few other places they didn't have the game. We got comments in our videos like, I can't get the game yet. Xbox, we were able to resolve it pretty quick. We got storefront translations done in a day, got it up there. The Sony one took us at least 2 months to rectify. It was just delay after delay after delay, and they had issues trying to get on the other storefronts, and it kept saying it was done, it wasn't done, and it really kind of hit you because after that time's passed, we're not on the new releases section anymore. We're just a game that appeared in that country, hidden, we'd never had any sales before, so we're just kind of buried for those ones. They're sort of picking up now for those regions, but I would definitely put some money into translating every storefront possible. You don't have to translate the game itself. People don't expect it to be translated as well all the time, but that's a really useful one to keep in mind. Console hardware to keep in mind as well. So console hardware costs. So Xbox will definitely advertise still that you get 2 kits free of charge. PS4 and Switch, you will probably have to pay for the hardware. I would just say no one can really guarantee that they'll give you loan hardware, but if you meet a rep in person, maybe you can get a chance to ask to give you some stuff. We've asked a few times for different things and have gotten things, but it's taken months and months and months to really, work and grovel to try and get something for a short amount of time to be able to do something. So it never hurts to ask to try and borrow something for a short bit. A professional use license agreement and privacy policy for the game and website data and anything you collect, that's also really important, so make sure you get some legal advice. We went to Cam Rogers, I think he's in Adelaide and done a talk here before. He's really reasonably priced, has great knowledge about games. He can give you some information about your IP protection and things like that as well, but that's some stuff that you wanted to add to each platform. And lastly is ratings. I don't know if it's cut off much there. Ratings are super pricey. We unfortunately rated our game manually through PEGI and other regions in the Australian Classification Board as well, early on before IARC, which is the International Rating Board. It's free, it covers just about everywhere, but didn't exist at the time that we were rating our game, so you'd be paying €3,000 or something per device that you're launching on for that's just for PEGI alone, so there's some pretty expensive costs in there. So I would definitely be looking to try and get IARC, or maybe hold off if you can on your release date. I think almost everyone has it now except for Sony in Europe, but yeah, if you do have to pay for ratings anywhere, it's super pricey, so keep that in mind. Now for some console insights that aren't just costs, things like that. Sorry, the talk's already been pretty long, so I'll try and breeze through some of this. Our dev team really wanted me to keep this one in here. If you are, this is about source control and things like that. If possible, keep your project for all platforms on the same branch. If you split off, the workload will be insane. Almost every platform requires really similar work involved, like user handling, things like that. If you do have to split off, for us, we chose to split off early on. We brought it back together because we're this is a nightmare. But Switch, we have split off now, but we know we can merge into the same branch. But Switch has a pretty different performance requirement for us, so we did want to kind of keep that one separate, and there were some things we couldn't really manage on the same branch, but you will waste so much time if you split off. Just think if you break your game off into 3 or 4 versions of your game, you're maintaining all of them for the future for all content updates, things like that, so big nightmare. If you're not doing source control, make sure you are. So test on all platforms early to see if any features you have in your game aren't supported by hardware. So for us, we found our basic camera setup and depth of field were deprecated on PS4, and also bugging out on Xbox, causing some really weird graphical issues. So we had to find, and with our weird field of view that we had for our game, it's really, really intense. There was no other depth of field solution that was viable as well, and it took a really long time to try and get something that was suitable. So it's worth probably, when you get the hardware, try and get your game on there without any of the requirements met. It will probably work out of the box, and then you can just go through and just have a look, make sure all your graphical features are okay. We also found that we had too many references in our code. So if you've got a game that references it's different part of your game component the whole way through, it will run terribly for load times on console. So all console hard disks are incredibly slow. I think PlayStation has the worst disk access I could imagine. I think out of all of the different platforms, load times on that are insane. Even for just like a 2 meg save file, you will have like a delay and a hitch. You have to do so much work to try and speed up this access to most platforms. So if you do have connected references in your code, try and break them up early on. For us, this was really challenging because like we had, the character was referenced everywhere as soon as the game started, and the character's connected to everything. So the entire game loads in the first loading screen. On PC, it was like 2 seconds. On console, that was like 40 seconds. And breaking up each of those connections broke the game as well, so involved a whole lot of QA time to try and fix that up. Useful once it's done, but plan ahead, do it right the first time. Plan out any differences. I kind of referenced this earlier in GUI and features for PC and console early on. If you're hitting all platforms, you want to make sure implementations supports gamepad and keyboard and mouse interaction. The one that we used for interaction for our custom menus for the game was really good for gamepads, but terrible for cursors. You couldn't really use them, so we scrapped it. But that was also, I guess, we started at a time before the GUI was a bit better in Unreal, and we had to go back and do a lot of work to make it work for all platforms. We're thinking pretty console-minded for us, so you got to keep PC in mind as well if you're still working on it. Engine quirks, I'll touch on real quick. They could block certification. For us, on Xbox, Epic had a bug that us and I think about 4 other developers found, and we're all trying to hit certification at the same time. And it would just be that a bunch of materials in the game would flash random colors and have random display things. It was pretty like seizure worthy on every 1 to 3 level loads. And considering our game loaded, we just got 1 minute rounds, so you're loading a new level all the time. It was really common, and we couldn't submit our game to cert, and it held us back until Unreal could resolve that bug with the code. And that was probably, we're waiting quite a few weeks there just for them to get through that back and forth, trying to make sure they can replicate it in-house. Tricky stuff like that. Keep any delays like that in mind. And keep performance in mind early. So I'd say for us, we always made sure our game runs on PC specs, like low-end PC specs looking the same as the high-end specs early on. And for us, that meant when putting our game onto console, everything was pretty much at 60 frames per second already. It was really great, without too much trouble. But if you don't do that, you're going to have a lot of work ahead of you, and you might have to sacrifice some graphical features to it. On Switch, we found keeping visual integrity while hitting 60 frames per second much harder, but it's been achievable with a lot of manual tweaks. So things in the background, because we've got a static screen game, we've just scrapped everything. For beyond that point now, it's just a picture. We've had to get rid of depth of field, things like that, but it looks exactly the same as it does on any other platform. You won't notice anything as you use it, but a lot of manual work involved with that. If you have an open world game on Switch, you're probably going to have a lot of trouble and a lot of work ahead of you to keep in mind. Cool beans. So always consider on performance. I think that's something we've already done on the next project as well. We've already got it running on the lowest end hardware possible on a PC to know that because we are hitting consoles, we know that this will already look like this and it will run perfectly on something like Switch, which is portable. Only a few slides left. So each platforms require you to pass certification when you release your game. I'd say that each one has really similar requirements for user handling, for quality assurance, network features, save file integrity, what happens if the console goes to sleep, things like that. You're going to go through probably hundreds of items for this that you're going to have to do tests which are already time consuming, and you might have to do some implementation to save specific data or make sure that you know exactly who was in the game when they came back last, or you can recover the game without it hitching or crashing, things like that. Certification is required for release, but it's also required for updates most of the time until you've kind of made a trust point with them. So you've got to keep that in mind as well. If you have a patch to do, or if you've planned for a big update, managing it you have to get certification of your new assets, your game, the patch content, everything. Well in advance, and also if you have a new trailer to announce your update, there's elements of each console platform that have to, different areas of the teams have to approve all of your content just so you can release this one update, which can take ages. So really try and keep in mind and ask people how much time things will take, and try and get a weight on that if you're trying to do big updates, things like that. Certification requirements won't require you to modify your gameplay, but you will need to work on things like the load times, the user handling pop-ups, and usually adding features and achievement calls and things like that. Another quick thing I'd say is when you first sign up for each platform, I would read through the checklist and guidelines for cert early on. to make a checklist of things relevant for you. Things like Connect and stuff on Xbox are definitely not relevant. You can kind of mark them as like, yeah, not doing that. If you're doing stuff that that you don't have a game that involves networking, I wouldn't really worry about that either. You could probably mark them off and then make sure that won't be a problem. One thing we did find, and that we spoke to a bunch of people who worked on interesting like networked online multiplayer games for consoles, is they said that the certification workload on each platform for them doubled. Networking requirements, there's a heap for consoles, so if you're planning to have an online multiplayer game, you will just have like twice the amount of things in your list of certification to go through, and they will be far more horrible to deal with. Just looking at some of them, they were so loud we could just like delete them and not pay attention. So keep that in mind if you're planning for online play. There'll be a lot of work involved there. There's a lot of requirements you have to meet. If you do cross-platform, I don't even like the nightmare there. I'm not even sure how that would be. I'm pretty impressed with some teams that have already done that as indies. So don't assume you can beat platform suggested certain launch timelines. For us, there was a couple of times where we tried to book insert, and we're like, okay, we can hit launch here. If we like book insert here, do this and that. Yeah, you'll never beat those timelines. Like the platforms need time to get everything done. Don't just like ever have like a hope that you'll somehow be like different than the rest of everyone else. Just play it safe, or you piss people off on the other end. They're all humans too. Cool beans. You need to look at your certification dates once your game is ready. Booking in dates for us, we found was usually easy to book dates in the following week. But again, I would keep in mind, make sure you're 100% ready when you go for it. And again, I'd keep in mind if there's something like E3 or PAX coming up, there's all these companies like doing things for the team right then. And like the times we reached out where it was booked out for weeks earlier on before we were ready, which was really interesting to know. And lastly there, try picking a local time for your release dates when you're doing certification for your metadata for your game. For us, we picked I think we just picked like a global time to begin with, which that meant everyone in the world would be getting it at like potentially a similar time. There were some really weird ones where some people would be getting the game a day before the other people. But if there's a local time setting like Xbox has, everyone will say you get it at 1 AM in the morning, wherever they are in the world. But definitely like release times is something you want to discuss with each platform. For PS4, they dropped our launch trailer at the kind of like global time that they're planning to launch the game, but they hadn't put our game live yet. So like the entire like first string of comments is just like, this game doesn't exist on the store, which was like terrible, pretty bad. So definitely try and like figure that out early on, have discussions about it, make sure you really understand time zones and what's happening in that space. So still a couple more slides left. We found Xbox and PS4 had a similar level of work required for certification. We're working on Switch right now, but the requirements are way simpler except for performance. There's literally nothing certification-wise we have to deal with right now. The game, things that they have, like achievements aren't supported on the platform. Controller handling and disconnects happen automatically. They're just like pop-ups by the device itself, so there's nothing involved with that. It's kind of great. The game just works. User handling requirements are quite challenging if you're making a local multiplayer game on Xbox or PS4. If you're developing with Unreal Engine 4, I'm sure the Melonhead guys will learn about that soon enough. They have no support in there for the combination of you have to touch controller IDs, user IDs. The combination of those things combined, there's no information there to work with, and you have to work through some really weird, complex ways to get that done. So keep that in mind if you're planning to have multiple users in your game on any console when you're working with Unreal at the moment. A bit tricky. Cool beans. And rapid achievement calls is another thing, or any network calls that might fail. On each platform so far, for example, in our game we have a section where in co-op you can get a gold, silver and bronze achievement if you get a certain time completed, and if you're playing together there were 6 achievements firing at the same time, and only about 2 of them would make it through. So you got to think in your game design we have to change things up a little bit with how like achievements were delivered, things like that. All of these things like have to tap into the platform's network services, and some things might fail. So yeah, think about your game design not to ever like request too much data from their online services too much at the same time. And real quick, there are some console time stats compared to our other ones. So Xbox there is the big one with 243 hours spent, and then everything else was tiny in comparison. So like PS4 was only 109 hours spent on it. PC specific features like some controller like user mapping and things like that was 86 hours, and Switch right now we're at 75, which seems a little high, but that's because we took the game out and we tried like the mobile render, we tried a different mobile render, we did all sorts of things with that just to see like what was going to give us best performance, but in the end we just stuck with the default renderer. Xbox is super high not because it was hard, just because it was the first platform we did. And we also touched on it like early on, then we took a break and we did some more features in the game for all platforms. Then we came back to it, and that controller thing I said that was a problem, they made a slight change to it on Xbox's end, and our workaround implementation was completely broken and we had to do it all again. So yeah, real tricky stuff there. But I would say that if we came back to it again, all our platforms, we could really get down to that sort of 80 to 100 hour mark for our next title. Okay, really quickly I'll touch on marketing. I won't go on these points very deep at all. Working with a PR agency, something we did, which I think was super valuable. We learned a great deal. It's a pretty pricey thing for us to do. Any marketing agency is going to cost a fair bit to work with, but it helps to do. Like, they did a bunch of campaign announcements for us. They helped us other times so we could do our own campaign announcements halfway through and not pay them, which was really nice. And now we know how to do press outreach and get like a successful announcement done and get a few articles generated and things like that, and do influencer outreach. But yeah, it's a really nice thing to have if you can afford it, I suppose, just so you have like people there that you can just, I don't know, CC them in an email and let it go and not deal with it. It's a really nice thing. Yeah, I think personally every team would have to weigh up the risk and value of hiring a marketing agency to assist with the game PR. But yeah, we found a lot of value of it in it, even if it didn't necessarily like score us articles from major outlets all the time. We just learned so much. We can tackle so much more with our next title now. In-house, we're always doing regular social on our Facebook and Instagram, things like that, on the fly. The Kickstarter campaign was probably our biggest marketing exercise that we did all together. Worked really well for us. Then trailers and social articles on official PlayStation and Xbox social channels. They are like the biggest, like best thing you could possibly have. They're not going to guarantee you ones for everything, so get it like in writing from whoever's going to be your main contact early on, like what you can do with them. So like Sony only really allows like guaranteed, I think, one trailer with them, and other ones like that it's just on a use case basis and timing. So and they've got easily the biggest social following at the moment. My Xbox was pretty high when we started out with them, but now Xbox was like user count of like watches on trailers and things like that. YouTube was like probably a quarter of what it was 2 years ago. People aren't really following it nearly as much. But yeah, getting a thing on like the Facebook page for PlayStation was like huge for us, like especially for a local multiplayer game. You just see all the comments, people tagging their friends, like so then you get one person tagging their 3 friends they want to play with. Amazing stuff. So yeah, definitely try and leverage that wherever you can. Ask for as many opportunities as you can. Cross events, what's another really great one for us? I've got a little weird picture on the next slide from that. Like the ukulele fan base is ridiculous, and the devs and marketing team behind that like pulled us in like so much attention, which was really, really amazing. It's a pretty slick way to try and like get support from other teams that already have a following. And yeah, events as well, so like things like PAX, GDC, even AvCon here as well, really successful at just getting our coverage and people following you. Even a smaller event, it was Hybrid World, the first year they did that. We still have people like from that event, like parents and stuff, emailing us asking like, when's the game coming out? My kid's been asking since Hybrid World, and you said it was coming soon. Like any of those little events like that are in the right market, like really valuable, really worth attending if you can afford it, because they're all crazy pricey as well. And yeah, biggest surge in activity were definitely the console announcements and the crossover things. And just there you've got a little chunk chart that one of the fans made for ukulele, because our characters are quite, like, I guess, chunky compared to the other ones. Like, I love just like, oh Lord, he coming. And then we have some really ridiculous ones in there. There was so many memes made by the ukulele fan base, as well as, oh man, I just had like a little other meme about meme in my head just then, sorry. Also like the Commander video fan base as well. There's some ridiculous stuff. Cool, marketing consults real quick. I will ask for the right contacts early on, like find someone in the team. There's general email aliases for every platform, but try and find like a person that you can speak to. If you can ever reach out to them, they'll give you much better advice, I think, or much more personal advice. And ask any release contacts you have for like launch date and promo advice. So anything beneficial for your game, they'll be able to tell you like when's the best time to launch, anything specific for your title that might be useful, and ways that you can probably plan to make more awareness about your game post-launch as well. And ask everything well in advance, because everyone is busy and these things take time to get answers. There's a lot of back and forth. Like one email chain question might take a couple of weeks to get all the answers you're looking for. You'll need to export trailer variations for each platform for marketing. So trailers, even though there's current documentation of what branding to add to your end slates for trailers, I think we got our trailers like sent back multiple times. Like say that the two different sides of Sony, they want one trailer, but they both have a different requirement for the end slate, and then like you have to meet in the middle somewhere. Same for press releases. Just keep that, if you're doing trailers externally and you're paying someone to do it, keep in mind some budget to like send it back to them and like, hey, can you make this now or something? Because people change their mind. Like the same trailer that was accepted for our release date announcement, like for the same end slate format, wasn't accepted for our launch like the month later. So yeah, keep that in mind. And time and date format is super important for release dates or anything that you lock in. Yeah, remember that US time date format completely different. Keep it in mind. Don't make a mistake there. Be real tricky for you. Almost there. Last two slides. Some stuff we learnt in general. There's local multiplayer games weren't really trending as much at launch for us compared to when we started making Brief Battles. When we started, Towerfall was super hot. Duck Game was super hot. Local multiplayer was really popular as a whole. But now we're in the time of like Fortnite, everyone's making a game as a service sort of thing, so there's sort of an expectation on each of our trailers that dropped. We noticed like every like second or third comment was like, is it free? It's not online, or like not free, not online, no one's buying this. Like you get like a bunch of those things. There's a real expectation from the younger generation now that every game should be online and it should be free. So if you're making a multiplayer game, it's a pretty tricky thing to like navigate. But I guess like there's still an audience, people that love couch games as well, but that's something we also got told. Like if you ask any publisher or any person you know at the start, they'll say like local multiplayer is risky. Like you're not necessarily going to make money out of it, but which is like a pretty risky one, right? But like they are like a long-term, like long burn game. So like for us, we could probably keep the price the same as it's forever. We can make like do like Christmas sales, things like that, which we're aiming for when like families are all together, and you can really kind of hit that audience without ever like devaluing your game. But yeah. In general, though, like the major audience, they expect to be able to play with their friends. People don't catch up as much as they used to. Pick your platforms. That's definitely a really important thing for us. Consoles make up 90% of our sales, and that's excluding Switch right now. Yeah, it's really important that we went with consoles. If we went on just on Steam, I think we would be just like nowhere and pretty disappointed. Console payments aren't immediate. That's something to think about as well. So if you are planning like to release your game, get paid a month later, so you guys can stay afloat, that is definitely not the reality of the situation. For us, like we've been paid only by one platform besides Steam, but like Valve, like they are paying us, but we're not making enough money. That don't even matter. But console-wise and stuff, I think the schedules are between like every 2 months or every 4 months, and sometimes like every like 3 months, but you have to invoice them or something ridiculous stuff. So we've like seen pretty much like no money yet. We know it exists, that it's coming, and that'll be great the day that it does come. But like keep that in mind. Like that's really released at the start of May, and like we definitely don't have anything like to keep us afloat if we're working full time. So you definitely need some post-launch budget. Use analytics in your game to help track data activity, improve the game. Google Analytics and Google Data Studio are totally free, and I think Unity and Unreal can both integrate them super easily. But it's going to be really valuable to see like what people are playing in your game, how you can improve it. If there's long sessions or people are dropping out, if your game crashes all the time, that's been super good for us so far. Don't be afraid to ask things. So for console support, advice from peers, crossovers, people are usually pretty happy to help if you've got a great product that you're passionate about. Never hurts to ask for anything. Try to keep in touch with other teams working on similar platforms at the same time. So we were in touch with like BitDragon, Studio Canvas, who are all working on the consoles and the same same versions of engine as well for us. And that was really useful. Just like, well, hey, we're having this problem. And like, oh, we did too. We did this. Most of the time, they're a bigger full-time team, and they'd resolved all the problems before we encountered them. So that was great for us. So keep in touch with people, and communicate, and also try and get in touch with your engine reps again. So like Chris Murphy from Unreal, he just helped us countless times with like suggestions of like this might even every now and then, getting towards the end, he's like, this effect would look way better if you did this, and I'm like, yeah, all right, that's great, really worth doing. And listen to all feedback about your game. So like even like the little things that you think at the start, like that's not the way the game was supposed to be, or eventually you hear something enough and like you just got to accept it and like consider making a change to make your game better overall. It's really worthwhile. Always fight feature creep, cut out anything unnecessary. I think that's something we found as well. Like over time, if you're working on the same project for a long time, you still try and creep new ideas you have in there because you're doing something for like 3 years, right? So you're like, oh, I got this new idea. This would be so good to put in the game. Don't do it. It's pretty much not worth it. You're going to waste some time. And you're going to need to send a lot of follow-up emails about console dev a fair bit. just remember that everyone on the other side is a human person. Like, a lot of the time you get answers from different people, but like, just, yeah, be friendly, because like I can imagine their inbox is like filled with horrible questions. And try and keep your emails like concise, and like dot points are great. At the start, I'm just horrible. I write like massive emails, ask too many things at once. It's a useless thing. You only get like one or two things answered, like dot points, or don't ask too many things at once. Yeah, and be real friendly. Yeah, genuine and friendly and interaction is another thing in every space that'll always help and go a long way. And that is about it. So, thanks for having me. I feel really guilty. I didn't introduce that's Molly, my first dog as well. She's pretty great, but she's not nearly as photogenic as the other dogs. Cool beans. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, man, go.
First, awesome slide. That was inspiring. And thanks for the talk. That was great. With the international market, you had the international marketing agency, yeah?
Yes.
Oh man, all the questions.
It's all good.
But basically, like, how come international? How was you dealing with it? How did you find them?
So we actually met them. So we were, for our first year. The question. Oh, I better ask that. So the question was, how do we meet and like deal with international marketing and communicate with them? So for our very first PAX, we were like wanted to get the media list and ask for advice. When we emailed like the little PAX marketing agency thing to get some advice, and the agency that was doing PAX at the time was Stride, and he emailed back and he just gave so much like free advice. It was really, really useful. And then we ended up just setting up a meeting at PAX to have a chat over some breakfast and like talk about like opportunities and ideas they had for the game. And it was, yeah, they had some really, really cool concepts. Like, so in the US, though, because our company is Juicy Cupcake, they were sending people like gourmet cupcakes like all over the world. They coordinated that wherever they had people, because they work globally as well. They did things like making custom underpants to send out and sticky notes and things like that as well. So yeah, just really cool concepts. And price-wise as well, they were like actually a lot cheaper to work with than at the time. The Australian dollar was slightly better. They were a lot cheaper to work with than local teams. We did have a few chats with some local teams as well, but they also required like a constant retainer that we couldn't afford at the time as well. So depending on, you have like a bit of give and take about that. But like, there's a lot of marketing teams online that you could just reach out with and have a chat, and they'll probably will only pick you up as well if they think they can do something good with your game. But if they kind of just like, yeah, we'll take you on, and they just have heaps of people and they don't like question anything about your game, like I wouldn't go ahead with it. Like, so with Stride, they were pretty into like learning about our game first to see if it was worthwhile or if they could actually do anything with it. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Cool. Yep.
Despite going through all these processes and in future possible games, and hopefully be easier doing all this, would you now consider going with a publisher so they can take all that stuff off your hands and you can focus on the game? That's a
really, really great question. So, after all this, would we consider going with a publisher for the future? Yes, absolutely. So, like, as great as this is, we could do it really quickly. Personally, so we had. So there's two of us with the team. Like, the other guy I'm working with, he's 10 years older than me. He's got kids and stuff. So I've been taking most of the financial hit for this one as well. I don't want to take that risk again as I'm kind of moving into that phase of life as well. So I think even if we have money behind us, I would love, even without like the money to make the online features or something, like I would definitely settle for just like great support to take us to events internationally. Because even with like the Unreal Dev Grant and things like that and Kickstarter, it was always a struggle, like financially, to think like if we wanted to go to PAX West or something, it would be an insane amount of money. It would just take away like all of our marketing value in general that we couldn't be able to afford like an announcement instead. Definitely a publisher, I would consider it. Again, I think that's another one now that we've got a game out there and like it's been reviewed well, would have a much like greater chance of probably being have a bit more leverage in those discussions as well. Yeah, really, really good question. Yeah, we'll definitely give it a go. Cool. Yeah.
Just to follow up with that question, would you find that a few of the points that you mentioned earlier in regards to like some hiccups that you had when you were going to different stores, do you think those certain aspects would have been rectified if had you gone with the publisher? They would have like dealt with all those little interferences? Yeah,
so would the publisher like help with any interferences we have with each storefront? I think yes, they would definitely have given some of this advice up front, which would really help. there were some teams though that sort of said like they would some just wanted to do everything themselves as well. Like they would go get like all the porting done with another team, things like that, which we didn't really want because that would like also take like more of a cut as well at what we get. So I'm sure that just meant they would do it with their internal team or something, and they had a great deal. But as well, some of them did still want us to do it like manually through ID at Xbox and go through the process ourselves. So in that case, maybe there still would have been a fair bit of like stuffing around to get done. Cool. Kathy, did you have a question there as well?
I did. I just was going to ask what GDPR stood for. We had it on the stuff we learned.
I don't ask me what it stands for. What does GDPR stand for? It's like the global something. It's the can I,
GDPR?
sorry?
Yeah, Alex, you should know, right?
Yeah, data protection regulation, global data protection.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
thank
it.
you.
So it's, I don't know if anything is done by it, but it's sort of like the European guideline to storing data. So like I think we're told that we're not allowed to store any data, even if it's not personal, for longer than like 12 months now. I don't think that's realistic in like doing things. Everything's data driven these days. You're going to have some sort of data, but I think like the guidelines would probably have to disconnect it completely from the users. Yeah, if you're going to be storing it. Yeah, interesting stuff. Cool. Any more questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose I think you've touched on it a little bit, but I suppose what did sort of the Kickstarter funding and the Unreal grant sort of allow you to do that you would have been able to say for just sweat equity?
Yeah, that's cool. Well, really, yeah, they were to help like, so a little bit of them helped us with the travel costs and things for accepting GDC. Like any time before we had money, I was just like, if some opportunity came up, I was like, if people say yes to letting us go to like the mega booth at PAX West, like how am I going to get there financially? I just kind of had no idea, but I was just going to wing it regardless. So yeah, with us it was really like helping to pay cover for events. Even like PAX Australia is not super expensive, but I think you find that just being there for a week for like GCAP and showcasing, you end up spending like $5,000 or something anyway. Getting a year there and back as well. For us, translations, things like that. Just ongoing company costs. I think just by using things like software service and subscriptions surprisingly take a fair bit of chunky cash out of your bank. I think being in the overdraft as well a little bit at that time, I was probably already like, you use a tiny bit of that, so you're like interest payments that you're already worrying about, that kind of sucks, but it just exists as well. But a lot of it was really localization. Yeah, those really expensive like ratings costs sucks. Like we just finished all our ratings and then I think it was announced that it was free for like Xbox, and one half of Sony like a week later or something. I was just kicking myself. But yeah, so a lot of it really went to that. I've got probably a lot more broken down data. If you ever want to chat, we can go back through it more and look back. But yeah, there's quite a few little things that it ends up like costing way more than you expect. Cool beans. Anything else? Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to ask if you guys documented the development of the game, like on YouTube channels or anything like that along the way there.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Did we document anything on the game on YouTube? Nah. So I think time-wise, if we were doing it in a more like full-time manner and we had a bit more time behind us, we probably would have messed around with that more. But I think every bit of time we had was like really like precious. That we were just trying to like make it happen as quickly as possible. Yeah, but that's a really interesting idea. I think that would have really helped the community building. Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask. If you didn't, do you think it would have actually contributed to that sense of community?
I think so. I think, yeah, like if that was something we did early on, especially, and we helped the transparency. I think there's a point, when we started moving to consoles, I think it would have become incredibly boring, and there's also a lot of stuff under NDA as well that we wouldn't be able to like discuss on the fly.
Yeah.
You can't have like dev kits sitting out in the room and all this stuff as well. So there's some factors like that, but yeah, I think it'd be a really cool thing to like mess with in the future if we get the chance. Cool. Yep.
It's more of a kind of general question, but is there anything that you look back on now that you really wish you focused on more? Like maybe so with Stride, whether you wish you focused more on working with influencers or PR, or wish you like similar question whether you wish you focused on growing a community. Was there anything particular that you look back upon and wish you had more time to be able to do, or resources?
Yeah, anything. It's questions. Is there anything I would wish we would have done more with our marketing team, things like that, to put more resources into one part? I think marketing especially, I think, yeah, probably influencers, but also more specifically, it's harder to find, but local multiplayer influencers, like I don't think necessarily a heap of research was done specifically in that factor. Like there's probably outreach to influencers that were kind of generally into that style of game, but a lot of the influencers like single player influencers, and I think that's a real big like miss where they go into the game, they hop into the multiplayer section, they sit there for like 3 minutes figuring out they can't play it, then they go play like single player content with that. I think that kind of like really hurts perception. A lot of people really loved it though as well. We've seen some great playthroughs, but like that was definitely a tricky one. Aside from that, anything we would have put more into, I think potentially I would have taken a chunk out of some of the solo content and probably put in AI. I think that's something we invested in a little bit, but considering like we have wall climbing, roof climbing, really tricky arenas, like it's something we looked at for like a month or two, but it was just so complex that it probably would have going to take like 6 months to do correctly. We kind of stepped it aside and we focused more on like the content we were already planning for it. But I think I would have gone back and done some AI. I think it's something we'll still maybe play with over time in the future now, but there's no real pressure to do so. But cool. Anything else? I think I've got to take these glasses off now. I can't really see anyone in the distance. Yeah.
What was the time tracking software you using?
Time tracking? So in this case, we didn't have like the perfect solution. So we've just been tracking it in Toggle, which is a free thing like TONG, GL. Yeah, it's like a free tool. It's just like really nice, just the free version alone. We're actually using it exclusively now. We have like each project is a client, and each of those clients has like an actual like project associated with it. So things like admin, dev, things like that. And we're just using pretty like basic words. Like I'll be like dev talk prep. I can go back and search that later and get the specific time against the admin task. Or it's really well to break down. But otherwise, using something like Favro or Trello, you can probably time directly through it with Toggle, which is really great. But we retrospectively put our times into a tool we were using, Favro, which is a project management tool, so then we can see like really interesting data insights and like burn down things like that, which was great. But I think just doing it basically and having like what we're doing now for the next thing, there's no real time effort into it. You just type it in, press enter, start doing what you're doing, click the next time, or when you're moving on. It's really, really useful in the long run. But always happy to talk about that more. So if anyone wants to get in touch, always happy to have a chat, answer questions, answer emails, have a phone call, whatever. Totally happy to.
Excellent.